have a long time holding my peace. I have been still and refrain myself. Now I will cry like a woman in labor. I will destroy and devour at once. I will make waste mountains and hills and dry up all the herbs. And I will make the rivers islands, and I will dry up the pools. And I will bring the blind by way that they knew not. I will lead them in paths they have known. I will make darkness light before them, and crooked things straight. These things will I do to them, and not forsake them. They shall be turned back. They should be greatly ashamed that trust in grace.
Hey, good morning. Good afternoon. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're here for an afternoon live stream. Just what works out today sometimes. That's the way it is. Better something than nothing. I do believe that. I always believe something is better than nothing. And I don't know how you can logically argue otherwise. It's hard to prove, though, right? Okay, so we're in Daniel chapter 6. Excited to be here. Let's read. Sorry about that. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom. And over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom. But they could not find none occasion, nor fault, forasmuch as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Then said these men, we shall not find an occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king, and said thus unto him, King Darius, live forever. All the princes of the kingdom, the governors and the princes, the counselors and the captains, have consulted together to establish a royal statute, and to make a firm decree, that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast... I'm sorry, I hit the thing and I was... into the den of lions. I knew that's what I was going to say. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing, that it be not changed, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Wherefore, King Darius signed the writing of the decree. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open of his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed, and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime. Hold on. We'll do this right. Even though I'm well into my day, somehow my voice is still not warmed up properly. Okay. I apologize for that. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. Then they came near and spake before the king concerning the king's decree. Hast thou not signed a decree, that every man shall ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, save of thee, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, the thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Then answered they and said before the king, the Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, regardeth not thee, O king, nor the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh his petition 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, was sore displeased with himself, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. See why he is inferior to Nebuchadnezzar? Nebuchadnezzar could kill and save whoever he willed. Darius has things that are over him. I'm sorry about the commentary. I just can't resist. Sorry. Then these men assembled unto the king and said unto the king, Know, O king, that a law of the Medes and Persians is that that the law of the Medes and Persians is that no decree nor statute which the king establisheth may be changed. Then the king commanded and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, Thy God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. And a stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. Then the king arose very early in the morning, and went in haste unto the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spake and said unto Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God whom thou servest continually able to deliver thee from the lions? Then said Daniel to the king, O king, live forever. My God hath sent his angel, and hath shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me. For as much as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt. Then was the king exceeding glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. Hold on a second. I'm glad to see that. Thank you for your patience. Try to keep the disgusting noises to a minimum, okay? I shouldn't even comment on it, right? I'm such a bad person. I'm kidding. I'm bad at being a person. How about that? Okay, because he believed in his God. Okay? And the king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel. And they cast them into the den of lions. Them, their children, and their wives, and the lions had the mastery of them, and brake all their bones in pieces, or ever they came to the bottom of the den. Then King Darius wrote unto all the people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, Peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and steadfast forever. And his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. And his dominion shall even be from shall be even unto the end. He delivereth and rescueth, and he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who hath delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius, and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. All right. Anyway, so here we have, now this is after obviously the destruction, well, not really destruction, but the, conquering of Babylon. Quite a brutal ending, though, right? Not just they throw them in and their wives and what wasn't it their children also? Yeah, and their children. That's pretty awful. That's like way over the top there. I don't think that was. It says the king commanded. I don't know that Daniel necessarily advised this. I don't know. Now, as awful as it is, it's an interesting illustration of a point of where I would say it's not when it comes to mercy, there's a fine line. I mean, you see that there are people who are just on the razor's edge of destruction, and justifiably ought to be. I mean, as far as their deeds are very close to destruction, yet they receive mercy. They are deeds worthy of, as Jesus said, he that denies me before men, I will deny him before my Father which is in heaven. Now, unlike the laws of the kings of Persia, the laws of God, are they immutable? Well, there's a sort of immutable law of God, but the laws that God gives to men to govern ourselves by are mutable. At least that's what appears to be from the scriptures. As far as like things like the clothes you wear 3 times. There's no commandment to pray 3 times. That was his custom. And that was his way. He was a very busy man. And when you're a very busy person in the affairs of this life, and this is not entirely his choice, it is often a good idea to set aside particular times to call on the Lord. Because if you don't, you may never do it. And so Daniel, in his great wisdom, of course, does this. He's in jeopardy of becoming, the basic, what would I call it? The proxy ruler of the whole empire of the Medes and Persians. He's one of these 3, because Darius, when you have a great empire composed, and the Persian Empire was a very cosmopolitan empire. It had all kinds of different peoples under it, subject peoples. That's why, if you ever saw the movie 300, you notice there was a very eclectic band of soldiers in the Persian army, because they weren't a unified, a regular fighting force per se. It was not just a single nation, like when you think of the Romans, especially in, Chaldean elements, Syrian elements, and even Jewish elements. Because the Jews were definitely incorporated into the kingdom of Persia. The idea that they invented God, the God of the Jews during the Babylonian captivity, I think is pretty ridiculous. And here's why. Of all the gods of the nations that were present, they always talk about how, he was just some little tribal god of the Jews. And it's like, and I understand that's how God introduced himself to them, to be their God. Because God looks down at man, having corrupted the image of God which is in himself. And we erect gods to worship. And he goes to a man and he says, I'm going to be your God, Abraham. And people, there's no reason he should even bother doing that. That in and of itself is an act of grace. All of what God does for us is grace. Because ultimately, none of us deserve anything except what we got coming. And I think we all know what that is. It's inevitable. Atheists often say, I accept that I will die someday and I'm not afraid of it. It's like, you consider the deal to be pretty fair. Overall, as far as what God gives you, the things that happen in this world, if you don't believe in God, you can't blame God for them. You can only blame men for them. People blame religion and something. It's not religion, it's men. You could say that religion is somewhat defective in that it does not make men good. And it doesn't per se. It has the potential to make men good. But like all things men touch, they become corrupt. Religion is corrupted. Of course you have pedophile priests, because where else are pedophiles going to get positions of trust and authority with which to be entrusted the care of small children? And of course they're going to also weasel their way into positions at schools. I'm not saying that's what it's all about. There's more than one kind of grooming. There's grooming for personal pleasure, but there's also grooming into, I don't know what I want to characterize it as, not so much an ideology, but into this social contagion. Into this perversity would be a better word for it, honestly. It's like a cancer. It's a corruption of that which is supposed to really be, and it grows, and it feeds off things that should be things that anyways, I'm going to stick with this. But like, Darius is subject to a law that is greater than him in his kingdom. I pointed out during the reading how that, Nebuchadnezzar was not subject to any. He didn't seem to fear anybody. He didn't have to worry about, and that's a portrait of ultimate rulership. Like being absolutely. I was just thinking about that statue with the feet of clay, part of steel, part of clay. Rome started off as a republic, which is, our republic, we have an intentionally weak government. That's like, it's funny because that's what republics are. It's to diminish the power up there. Isn't that interesting? It still is a powerful nation, but it's more commenting on the power of the government within those things, or of the ruler who, represents that idolatrous image, like the image of the beast. Because the beast is that cult of personality ruler. And Daniel, we got to understand that these are insights that are going to help us understand the nature of evil and in rulers, both good and evil, because men can be turned and their purposes can be made to serve good. Now, the thing I was talking about before that I want to get back to is that aspect of this conflict of the parents have eaten the sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. Of a man being thrown into the lion's den, and in some way they're torn in pieces before they hit the ground, is what it says. They never really get to the ground. This is the lion's den, and they're all starving lions, and they didn't eat Daniel, and they're hungry. It's awful, but mercifully quick, I guess. That's one thing I would say. Like, if they were going to do such an awful thing, I'm glad that the Lord made the lions exceedingly violent to tear them in pieces as soon as possible. If this is going to be their manner of death. I mean, like, let it be quick. So that's the Lord. If you look at it in that perspective, it's like the brutality of the Persians is met by the mercy of God, the mercy of death, which is a mercy at times. Believe me, because if you knew what the Romans used to do with prisoners of war and animals and stuff, they like to prolong the suffering, So, okay, so there's a conflict of like, well, children aren't responsible for the sins of their parents. They're not. But, in as much as, we ourselves, like, when people, they'll often say that abusers were abused as children. Themselves. And it's sort of like a tragedy, but they still become predatory as adults. Not all. Not all people who are abused become predatory, but many predatory people were abused. And it goes to show that, like, how you deal with the suffering you encounter, the things you experience, you still have agency. It's like, do you take that awful thing that happens to you and turn it into resentment against others? And then, and want to make them suffer like you did? That often is what some people take. Or do we rather have compassion and empathy drawn from that and realize that, we should be sympathetic to the plight of others who suffer? Such things, or anything. So, when I see that, it's like, it's awful. Okay. But also, these are some pretty wicked men. And I, it's like, I understand how, like, I have raised my sons a certain way. They are after my image in a lot of ways, and even the little ones have already absorbed a lot. It's like, and if you do something to me, you're going to create something. Revenge, whatever. And it's a practical thing sometimes. They would just like the mafia, just do away with them the whole. I don't know if the mafia really does that. They're usually a lot less cold-hearted, aren't they? Yeah, they usually leave the family out of it if they can. I don't know. Well, a lot of times people will hurt your family or threaten to. I haven't gotten threats like that. People are like, it'd be awful if something happened. You're a nice family there. It'd be terrible if something happened to it. I always inform them, that what you just did there is technically illegal. It's called intimidation because you're trying to intimidate me to stop me from teaching things that you don't like. Because it's like, I don't know, I don't try to intimidate people, but I always say it's like it would be a dreadful mistake for someone to try to come after me in some way outside of the law. It's like, let's be civil. I do believe in that. It's like I will, just like the Lord, he subjected himself to it. I will not, and just like Daniel, we will not obey their laws that go contrary to what the truth is, what God says what we should do. Just like the beast, we will not worship the beast. We will not take his image or his mark, worship his image or receive his mark. And when you've gone through something like the pandemic and you stood up against the crowd, you have reason to have confidence. If you didn't, you have reason to think, okay, now that I see that's kind of what it's going to be like. It's going to be tremendous peer pressure. And, people are already brainwashed, and they still are. Unfortunately, it's like there hasn't been really an awakening. Everyone just went back to sleep. But they're ready to do it again. If the government uses emergencies to grab power, they will eventually create emergencies to grab power. And they're going to start declaring it a climate emergency. Everyone knows this. And we should, this isn't the time to talk about it, but people should plan ahead and try to stop that before it happens. I'm not sure how to do that. I'd have to write a song about it. That's about all I could do. I'm not a powerful person. It pleases Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes over the whole kingdom. And Daniel, of course, is preferred above them. I was saying about that thing about the children's teeth and said, to punish them, I guess what I'm saying is like there's a fine line there of ultimately human beings all need mercy from God if we think we're going to live forever, okay? If we can accept that we all have to die, and if you look back at if you're like me, you know that we're standing on a lot of dead bones. A lot of men have died. A lot. A lot have lived and died. While we're here, we think we're so special. And it's like we're not. But if God says we are, we can be. He wants to make us a peculiar people to himself, just like he did with the children of Israel. And Daniel here perfectly describes what is required. We must be faithful. Faith, you are saved by grace through faith. The grace of God is what ultimately is saving you. The power he gives you to do that is the faith you have. Because you wouldn't be able to say the Lord Jesus is Lord if it had not been given to you from above. Even, like it says, even the wicked, you would have no power over me except it was given you above. Have I not chosen you 12 and one of you is a devil? I don't know who everyone is, but the judge stands at the door. So anyways, they all are jealous of Daniel, as obviously the story is pretty straightforward, right? They want to find occasion against him concerning the kingdom. They want to find, he's mismanaging, he's embezzling, he's doing, but he doesn't, there's no fault. He's just doing his job and doing a damn good job of it. He was faithful. He was faithful in everything he had to do according to his duties. There was not against the law of God. He was not, he was a eunuch. He served the king. Obviously, he was seen as a valuable, when they conquer Babylon, they look at these characters as assets that they have now acquired. They get rid of the rulers and then they take all the advisors and then they figure out who's best. It's a sort of Machiavellian, very, logical way of approaching things, brutally so, right? But this is the ancient wisdom of the world. And I'm not saying it's the wisdom of God, because God doesn't, you see how many mighty men are called? Daniel is a eunuch. He's not the king. There are kings and there are paupers too, many called, chosen, faithful. Those that are with him are such. We shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. We got to find some way to trip him up with this law of his God. Because I don't think the praying 3 times a day is a particular law. But thou shalt love the Lord thy God, him only shalt thou serve. And Daniel, he is a busy man. He has to make contact with God. He must pray. And he does this 3 days. Unless I'm not aware. Now, another thing I was saying about before that I want to get back to is when I was talking about, people who question, oh, well, they invented Yahweh in Babylon and all the Old Testament got invented there. It's like, you mean that the Jews were so anxious to have their temple rebuilt in Jerusalem, Nehemiah and Ezra and all that, based on something they cooked up in captivity. That all that place structured, and they wrote about all this stuff while they were in another country. They wrote about all the geographic locations and all the stories of the Old Testament. That was all cooked up in Babylon. That's what a lot of modern skeptical scholars believe. I certainly believe that you're having an assembly process, and of course in Babylon, the prophets are going to be in circulation as important, and new things coming together, and I don't object to the idea of books being assembled, reassembled, edited, or whatever, because it's like they may have thought that there was perfect liberty to do so. As any servant of God may, on the calling of God, take writings, and I don't know, but so I don't have a problem with that. Like the idea, if we ever found scriptures that predated, like actual physical ones that predated the captivity. There are some very ancient, like, I believe something that had part of a scripture. Definitely things have been unearthed from before, from the kingdom period, but they're mostly like inscriptions, I believe, right? Of like David the king, and there might be a part of a scripture. But that's the point. There was a basis. It wasn't like they just like cooked it up. That notion, I think, has died significantly, or let's say died down significantly, or has become less plausible among people who are of honest scholarship. A lot of times you hear that from people who really don't know anything, but just have read some old skeptical literature. Because archaeology is an ongoing thing. There's a lot of places to dig things up, even in the Holy Land, like that. Maybe, let's say, it would only if you're someone who doesn't like people who talk about the earth being older than a few thousand years. If you don't like that kind of talk, you wouldn't like that book. But it's talking about how systematically, and because of the academics, the way it works, the status quo is very, just like, people always talk about Copernicus and the church, or Galileo and the church. It's just the authorities, the scientific authorities, the people who were in authority over science. And that happened to be the church, yes. But that's not the case now. Who's in authority over science now? Well, it's those people. And just like always, the people in authority over things act like this. Someone does things better. Someone comes up with some new revelation that contradicts what they've been teaching for years or anything like that, shows them up. You get this kind of behavior where they start to try to have it in for you. This is how I get fired. Well, no, I get fired. I don't get fired a lot. The 2 times I got fired by subterfuge, by people who worked with me after a while taking a dislike to me because I do not, I don't become socially subservient to them, and they're not my supervisor. It's like, I guess that's what I would call it. Because it's like, they're not my supervisor, so I don't owe them some sort of subservience, and I feel like it's some sort of social dominance thing. So it's like, whatever, I don't care. Because I don't work I've learned, that was when I was young, I never got socially fired as an adult. No. So those were just me being young and mouthy, probably, and knowing who I didn't have to answer to, anyways. But they cook up this scheme to write this decree that, that's sort of flattering. They come to the king with flatteries. I love it when the way he says he was angry with himself. He was angry with himself. He didn't blame them. He understood their motivations. Though they're wicked, he knew their motivations and he fell for it. And see, in this, he's kind of powerless. He's no Nebuchadnezzar. He can't just say what is. He can't just declare life and death. What are you talking about? No, I'm going to chop you in pieces and make your house a dunghill. It's like, but he does get to the same result. Because, there is, it reminds me of the crucifixion, of course, because one, it's interesting. It's all, one of the things I was always regretted was that on my first album, The Fear of Yahweh, or Yahweh, I did a song, Psalm 22, which is one of my favorite scripture songs I ever put together. And I at the time I was confused because in the Strong's Concordance it said, instead of they pierced my hands and feet, it says a lion, my hands and feet. And I was like, what? And so I sing the lion pierced my hands and feet. I kind of throw both ideas in there when I sing it. I should have just left it, they pierced my hands and feet, which is the Septuagint rendering. Whereas in the Masoretic text it's different. But the Dead Sea Scrolls concur with the Septuagint text. But but the idea that they changed the words a little bit, because Ariel, or something like, I forgot the exact word. The word used there is very similar. It could be they pierced or a lion, because in Hebrew, the vowel points aren't there, and just a little bit of a change in a text, it's very easy to change the meaning. And it's most important in context. The idea of a lion, exclamation point, my hands, my feet, is a little bit not the way the Hebrews talked. And that's why the more ancient reading is they pierced. But still, it does say lions compassed me round about, And that's also, and so, that imagery, and that's Psalm 22 it's a Psalm of David, so it predates Daniel quite a long way. But the imagery of being surrounded by lions, certain death, as far as that's what the imagery is of. You are in the encircled by predatory monsters that want to eat you. The lion tearing at your flesh. So the king, signs this decree, this royal statute, firm decree, for 30 days. I don't know why it's a 30-day law. It reminds me of, honestly, this reminds me, it's going to sound funny, but in a Bible style, it's all right. It reminds me of what they did to Donald Trump in New York, so that woman could prosecute him for that alleged rape. They basically made a law that said, the statute of limitations is extended for 6 months for people who were in this period. So now, if you had a case from 20 years ago, you can bring it forth, but you got 6 months to do it, and then it's done, no more. It's like, what? Why only for 30 days? Why is this 30 days thing? Yeah, there's a just so kind of thing, and I see why the king was angry with himself. He should have sniffed this out, but his eyes were blinded, so that this point could be made. And it's good for kings to understand. The point is, one, the king is not above the law. But also, while the laws can be framed to bring in justice, that's they frame mischief by a law. As one of the sayings of the prophets. I'm thinking of Habakkuk. Yeah, I think so. But it's okay. But you don't need the reference. Everyone knows framing mischief by a law is a bad thing. It's like in California, they're passing laws that say that if you fail to affirm your child's gender confusion, you have abused them. And what I would say is if you fail to affirm your child's birth sex, you're abusing them. For sure. That's child abuse. If you tell a little boy that he might be a little girl because just because he talks about maybe, what if I was a little girl? Like, they want to play pretend maybe, which is whatever. I mean, it's kids like to be all, what if I'm a doggy? What if I'm a squirrel? I used to be Super Bunny when I was a little kid, you know? And even when I was older, I've admitted, I felt envy for women, and because it seemed to me like they had an easier time of it. All they had to do was be pretty, and I know that's not true. You know, it's like, yeah, right. That's a cliche. It's like, and maybe for a tiny percentage, it's like saying men have it great. They just get to be, you know, they get all the money and the power and position, and they're all chief executives. It's like, what? That's what all this equity and inclusion stuff it is. It's to make you. We'll put a few more people in elite positions who are minorities and perverts, basically, I guess, because they're a new minority. You know, openly, let's say, sexually adventurous. You know, they want the world to know about their adventures, apparently. You know, the adventures they like to go on frequently or whatever. They think that's their identity. I'm a married man, but that is not my identity. You know, I mean, that's not who I am. That's a part of my life. You know, it's important. It feeds into who I am, no doubt. But it's like the idea that I would center my entire identity on the idea that I am a heterosexual husband. You know, it's like, it's just so weird. It's only, right? I mean, because back before this was a thing, people had identities based on actual accomplishments. I don't know why I'm getting off on this stuff. But because, when they because they're, when you make a law, I know I'm getting off it because, like I said, that's the kind of thing. They're setting traps for people, for the righteous, for when you do something right, like tell your kid, it's fun to pretend to be something we're not. I like to pretend to be something I'm not. I like to put on a costume and jump around and pretend I'm the devil, And some people might find that very offensive, even people who believe, but it's like, what do you think? You ever read the book of Revelation as they tell you about, some people disagree, but whatever. Let them disagree. Point is, there's a difference between reality and show or pretend or demonstration or vision. You know what I mean? It's like visions and dreams are not reality. So also is a child who likes to pretend to be something they're not, whatever that happens to be. A parent who tells their child that says, it's perfectly fine to pretend and to do, explore different toys. I certainly never, I let my boys play with baby dolls and they use them and they'd be like, boom, 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 here comes the monster. And it's stomping on the guys. And like, that's just what they do. And then you give the girls, the little guys with the machine guns, and they're sitting down at the table and they're talking. It's just and it's not always that way. But just even if a girl plays a little more like a boy, doesn't mean she's a boy. It doesn't mean it's abuse to tell her, no, sweetheart, you're still a girl. That's okay. Because you can be a girl and like to do things that boys like to do. There's nothing wrong with that. And you don't have to like everything they like to do. You may find because I know I have girls around me and I know people that are like, they like some of the things boys like. And more than most girls do. So what? Maybe I like things girls like more than most boys do. It's like, I don't know. What's the problem? It's like, everyone has to be exactly the same, or we have to pigeonhole people as soon as they feel a certain way, as soon as they like a taste. When we were kids, the thing was, I thought it was like, just because a boy wears pink, it doesn't mean he's a girl. Everyone was like, that was the whole point. Like, it was okay. A girl doesn't have to wear a dress to be a girl. She can wear blue jeans. It used to be that. Now it's like, if you would do anything, I guess we got to put all the girls in little dresses, because that's what it means to be a girl. It's absurd. And to put that into law is wicked. And bad things can happen. Oh, bad things will happen, do happen, are happening. How about that? It's beyond the point of warning. We are sailing over the cliff. We're just waiting to hit the bottom. There's no turning back now. But you know what's kind of the thing is, it sort of has to. I do believe, I don't really go back on any of my, I don't think you turn this around with writing laws. They're going to try to write laws, and that just gives the wicked something to aim at, something to protest about. You know, some way to say they're being persecuted. You're just sort of feeding into their hands. They're not being persecuted. What they're doing is already wrong. And it's not, it should be socially unacceptable. The problem is they're enlisting the law to promote it. And now if you even, people who protest it, who go, you know, I don't really, I don't like to go places I've protested once, and I don't like to harass people at their things or anything like that. I prefer to speak generally. So I don't know. I'm not against people who do, but you see people there's protesting, and then they try to pray at the protest or say something. Not to they try to protest a celebration is what it is. And they're taken off right away. They're arrested. Because you can't speak against it. I mean, you can, but they don't want you to. They want to make it so you can't. Well, that's not acceptable. You know. That in that case, I'm going to keep speaking against it till they come get me. Till they come get me. Come and get it. Which I think would be very foolish. I hope they never come. I really do. Hope they never come. But this can't be allowed. You know. It can't be allowed. We can't have... And that's the thing, is they corrupt their children, and their children are corrupt. And then you have a situation where you have all these broken people running around breaking things. And society is being torn to pieces. But because it starts in the family home. That's the thing. It's a brutal truth. But when a bad man, it's like you understand. In as much as there are people like me raising my family godly, all my children, I intend for them to be virgins when they get married. You know? And I don't think it's that hard because we don't, because of certain things. You know? But I mean, I raise them right in many other ways. They're liked by people they meet in society. And not only, it's like, and they're pretty content and also on board with what was done. They when they become adults, they praise the ways they were raised. Okay? That's all I could ask for. I mean, as far as like say, okay, they think they were raised right. I always was a little in doubt, and I've made plenty of mistakes, but overall it was done well. Okay, good. I did that. But there are people also who are out there trying to raise their kids evil. Look at Joe Biden and his son. Look at that family. They've raised that boy to be evil, to go around collecting bribes from foreign countries when they're supposed to be serving our interest. That is wicked. Wicked Joe Biden. Wicked Hunter Biden. The whole family is corrupt. The father corrupts the son, and the wife corrupts the father. We want this. We need this. Just like Jezebel in the Old Testament, And these families can be like, what do you do with a family like this? Throw them all in the lion's den. That's what you do. Husband, wife, children, all of them in the lion's den. Because you can't leave remnants of such wickedness around. I don't think infants so it's like it says children. It's, I don't know, maybe they were his teenage kids. And Darius looked at them and said, them too. They're already so wicked I can hardly stand it. And sometimes it goes down even when you got a little, because these people, when I mean by wicked, I mean like family where the mother and father initiate the child into sexual abuse at a young age and stuff like that, or other things. I mean, in this age, those are the things you just hear about, but also in the political corruption, bribe taking, wickedness. My dad told me about some of the things his father taught him, like what a wicked upbringing looks like. And my grandfather was generally a good man, but he told my father things like how to lie to the police and how to lie and not get caught, how to properly bribe a policeman. These skills can also be passed along. Criminal skills, wicked skills, knowledge of evil things, how to do the evil things, how to get away with it. And the wickedness spreads within the family. So just like I make a family to be a force for good and to be good, there are those who construct their families for nothing but the furtherance of their evil designs. And that's how they end up tossed in the lion's den. And it can be quite just. I'll tell you, I'll take that. First I was like, whoa, that's pretty tough. But it is tough. That is a pretty wild end. Right? I mean, just throw the whole family. That's shocking. But maybe not. Right? Maybe not so shocking. Maybe not so shocking. Especially after their murderous attempt on Daniel. These are conniving, sneaking murderers who put the king in a position where his hands were tied. Because then somehow the law couldn't be, and he himself is even subject to this. So I say about God, I always try to not bind God. Like say, well, God can't do this because of that. They all say, God can't do this because of that. Everything that God does and doesn't do is because that it is in his nature to be that way. Meaning the laws, the things that God governs himself by are not external to him or above him or outside of him. They emanate from him and they represent his eternal nature and character. That's the ultimate good, the ultimate right. And the ultimate vision of his own work of what he's doing is really that too. That ultimate right, that ultimate good. And his law that he gives us, again, he can change. I give you a new law. I will write a new law in your hearts. I will give you a new heart. It's different too. But and also new law is also like the way you govern, the way you do things, and the way you interact with God. Why can't he change those things? A lot of those things I demonstrate, if you look at the story of Abraham, a lot of the sacrificial customs were customs that, of course, predated, and that God used to speak to Abraham in a language that he understood of what a covenant is. Because who taught Abraham to make a covenant? Where did he get this idea of okay, we'll cut up the animals and do all this stuff? It didn't and again, this could be, like I said, a reflection of a ongoing memory of the original religion of men, seeking to reconcile themselves with the God they had just lost track of, so to speak. I mean, we just woke up to our sin, and the Lord is not walking among us anymore. Not natively. We can walk with him, but we have to follow him. We have to find him. We have to seek him. And if we find him, it's because he was actually first seeking us. And he put it in our hearts even to seek him. So he signed the writing and the decree. Daniel knew. He went to his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem. He always looked out. He didn't close the door. I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to hide. That's how I feel. It's like, hey, when they decree, when they say, oh, you got to be locked down, and I remember the first day, I was a little nervous. I had papers, I literally brought papers with me of the governor's orders, because if anyone because I read it, and I'm like, okay, I can do things that people aren't doing because they don't read this. And if any cop tries to mess with me, I was going to, because early on I wasn't sure if police were going to be out and trying to enforce lockdowns. I was like, am I going to get pulled over for being out? Because I remember being out the first night of lockdown. It was dead. I was out, and I was like, I'm going to go over to my brother's house with my kids and drop them off to hang out with their grandfather, like always. And I did that every week. We occasionally skip a week, but we kept doing it all throughout the pandemic. And I even brought people, like I said, I don't live in fear. I won't live in fear. Put at risk. Everything's at risk. What are you talking about? Risk. Every risk is calculated. Every time you get in a car, you're taking a risk. Every time you get in a plane, you're taking a risk. Every time you get out of bed, you're taking a risk. Every day you stay in bed, you're taking a risk. There's risk left and right. Each person's got, every breath we breathe in life with risk, is what I said in the song Freedom Convoy. So he refuses to hide in a corner when he prays to the Lord. Nothing wrong with going into your closet. And this isn't like he was always out, I'm praying to God. It's not like he was trying to make a show of it. He liked to look out onto God's sky, not the palace of the Persians, and look towards Jerusalem, his home, that he'd been taken from as a boy, and pray. And doubtless pray for their return, because Jeremiah had promised they would return. That after 70 years. It didn't quite work out after, I mean, there's arguably, after 7 years, they began to return. That's why I look at it, because it's like, for 70 years, they couldn't return. Sorry, I should have muted it for that. So, he prayed. Pray means, let's see what word they use for it here. I usually think of it in terms of, it does mean to ask and to petition. Let's see what this means here. I gotta have the right Bible up. 50 minutes in. Okay. That's fun. It is fun to talk current events with it, because this is political. I mean, it's like, what else am I going to talk about? I'm going to compare it to the way the world is now and the way the world may be in the future, when we have even worse despots to deal with that try to put the whole globe under their control. They're working on it, right? They've been working on it a long time. I'm interested in seeing if we can like do something to wound it. When they try, as it tries to rise. That's why I'm always like, I want to craft lots of little arrows to fire at it as it rises, because I feel like we can shoot it down, and then it'll come back, and bite us and kill us. So it's like, but it's still fun to make it angry. I think so. Like I said, I like Daniel. He doesn't, he's like, yeah, I'm still going to pray. I know it's illegal. And because like the three Hebrew children, I don't know necessarily say I'm having a flippant attitude towards it. I doubt he did. And I think of him as stoic. We don't have any insight into Daniel's feelings. It doesn't really say, like as far as like whether he felt fear, at this event. I'm sure as a human being he felt fear, just like Jesus, at the Garden of Gethsemane when he was about to. But he knew he was going in to get killed. I'm sure if the Lord appeared to Daniel, said, Daniel, you were going to die. I will not deliver you this time. You've served me faithfully, but this is it, or whatever. I don't think how could he do that to Daniel? He couldn't do that. But you know what? Many times the Lord has let his servants be killed. And as the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, maybe the Lord will deliver us, maybe he won't. But we're not gonna worship your idol. Same thing with Daniel, it's like the inverse. I'm not going to stop worshiping my God. I'm not going to stop making my petitions to my God. I continually petition him because they have to ask of anything. That's why I say pray is going to mean something like petition, because giving thanks had nothing to do with the law. If he just gave thanks to God, I don't think it said anything about, Darius could have, because Darius worked all night. He wanted to find some sort of loophole. Maybe there was a law already decreed that would allow him to back, because that's often what you do. There's a loophole, a back loop. You're going to do something like change the case, make it to a different venue, whatever, something. He would be looking in all the laws of the Medes and Persians, which don't change, and there's probably a lot of them by now. That's why it's so, at some point, some king said, there's a new law, that the laws never change. And that's kind of like, whoa, wait a second. Nope, never change. Yeah, keep all the old ones on the books. You can make new ones, but you can't change the old ones. It's like, what? No repealing, no amending? Like, what if we make a bad law? Nope, never change. It's like, isn't that the worst law we ever made? No, I like it. We're going to never change our law, and I'm the king, and I get to decide this, except now I can never undecide it. But that's okay. Bad idea. Silly law. But not as, bad idea all around. But I was going to say not as bad as some of the laws are passing these days. Well, I don't know. I can't say that, because having the inability to change laws you pass is we almost have that problem, because we have so many laws on the books and stuff. It's like, it's just a huge mess. That's why, if the government wants to they can go after just about anybody because everybody's got some sort of something, not some obscure law you may not realize. It may not be they can put you in prison for it, but they could probably give you a hard time. You know, levy fines. Oh, this is wrong, that's wrong. And it's like, God. I don't know about everybody. They say that. I guess it depends on what your business is and how long you've been living. Do you own property? Because they have a lot of ways they can get at people, like these dudes, you know. So let's see. Where's the word pray? There we go. Do. Okay, wait. Wow. It's the word. Oh, I'm not familiar with it. Tesla. Or tsala. Aramaic again. Oh, this is their word for it. To pray. Oh, doesn't say exactly what it's. It's a prime root, and it means to pray. In the sense of bowing, from salah. See Hebrew salah. I wonder if it's in the sense of bowing. It almost seems like obeisance, but okay. I guess because one does often bow his head to pray, right? And then so it's sort of like a word that means to pray, not like, because the Greek ones, literally, they're words that mean like to petition or ask. And the Hebrews may have had another word that means to ask particularly. But I wonder now back, when he says the decree, what the word is there. I want to see not about the decree, but about petition. A petition. See, there it's different. It is petition. I just thought maybe pray would mean something like petition, but this is a word that specifically means a petition, to ask for a thing. Well, when one prays, one assumes one is asking for things, right? I do, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Even if you're asking for things that are just things that you've been told to ask for, you're asking for things. And Jesus told us to pray asking for things. When you ask. There's like a lot of things. Ask in my name. Whatsoever you shall ask in my name, that I will give it you. We are called to ask of God, to petition of him, and to look to him for our needs. It's part of trusting him. Now, not he shall supply all your needs, but also he supplies our needs by giving us the knowledge and industry to do the things we have to do. It's like, just like when, I relate to when Satan took Jesus to the pinnacle of the temple and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. And said, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will give his angels charge over you. They will keep thee in all thy ways, and keep thee in all thy ways, lest thou dashest thy foot against a stone. That's a very bad paraphrase. But the point was, he tried to get him to do something foolish to sort of prove God. That's why he said, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. You know that if you jump off a building, what's supposed to happen, and the way God made the world, is you're supposed to go splat. Just like if you go into a den of lions, you're going to get eaten. And I would only have hope if I walked into a den of lions on purpose or whatever, of escaping without being devoured, if perhaps I was there because the Lord wanted me to be there and wanted me to come out. Or any of us. Let me go back here. He prayed and gave thanks before God as he did before time. And these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. They came near and spake the king concerning the king's decree. Hast thou not signed a decree that every man shall ask a petition? Right. Save thee, O king, shall be cast in the den of lions. And the law altereth not. We've talked about all that. Answered said the king to Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah. Regardeth not thee. The captivity of the children of Judah. That was the Babylonian captivity. It was the kingdom of Israel had already been taken captive, and whatever was left of Israel had been incorporated into Judah, though they may not have all been the tribes of Judah. That's why in the New Testament they're all called Jews. And also, they use the term Israel. Like when Jesus says, I am sent not but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. When he said that, then you notice his whole ministry was directed towards the Jews. only making very few exceptions, such as the Canaanite and the Samaritan. And the Samaritans, at least, were like a, what would you call it? Well, we're a sort of they're like the Jehovah's Witnesses of the Jews. I mean, and I don't mean to say that to be insulting at all, but they had taken up the Jews' religion, but with differences, because they were not natively them and they were living separate from them, and they couldn't do all the stuff contained in the law, so they kind of amended their understanding of it so that they could follow it in their own way. And the Jews kind of hated them for it, because they looked at them as being, kind of like, they may have had some relation too, because there were some Israelites probably who stayed in that land and became unified with those people. But I would think most of them probably did flee to Judah. And after the invasion of Assyria, they would have been drawn to Jerusalem. And in fact, archaeologically, at that time, the city went under a major increase in size. Like after the Assyrians swept through, Jerusalem became a much larger city by more than a factor of 2. I mean, it was more than 2 times bigger, residentially. And that's when it happened. A lot of people ended up moving to Jerusalem when all the cities were destroyed and taken captive. There'd be kids who ran and hid, and people living in the countryside hiding out, and there'd be leftovers. And then there'd be no more major structure of society to keep holding things up, so they'd have to all kind of condense, or like I said, wait till the strangers come, the Samaritans. But there's really not a story of integration. There is a bit of a story. I mean, because they sent a priest of the Levites to the Samaritans, the people who became known as the Samaritans, who were actually people from the area north of Assyria and stuff, other conquered peoples. And they learned that from, I think they said it was a kind of a corrupt priest. I think it said corrupt, but it was basically a priest. They got a priest who knew something about the worship of the Lord. And what's interesting is their existence. How was it cooked up in Babylon? When the people that the Assyrians imported, who became the Samaritans, already had a religion that looked like the religion of Moses. I understand why that circumstantial evidence doesn't make it obvious that the law of Moses was not written in Babylon. Because people who were in Canaan, strangers, assimilated the religion of the Israelites who were gone, before the Babylonian captivity even took place. So, doesn't make much sense to me. It all got cooked up in Babylon. I mean, this was cooked up in Babylon, obviously, and beyond, and in Persia, obviously. And also, I think it's obvious that Moses didn't write the whole Pentateuch. He probably put it together. That's what I think. Or at least, certainly the Genesis through Leviticus and Deuteronomy, I suppose. Some people would argue about Deuteronomy, of course. But they're always pushing to just discredit the whole Bible because there's difficult passages. Oh, boy. I said the nature of inspiration is not as people fantasize it to be. It's a still small voice. God doesn't speak with big blunt letters, in a flashing billboard. He doesn't. It's a quiet voice, still and small, speaking just the plain old truth. It has to be kind of sought out. I mean, it is kind of obvious, but you have to listen. You have to pay attention. And laid upon the mouth of the den, as king seal of his own signet, and et cetera, that the purpose not be changed concerning Daniel. Now, I got to think, do we want to go late? We talked about, we didn't talk about the king fast. I don't know. I feel like we're done with this chapter, sort of, but I don't feel like I want to leave it just yet. Yeah, we got more scriptures to talk about, and this is supposed to be a line-by-line study, even though we have talked about a lot of the issues. It's such an interesting, it's a very, it's an important story, is what I would say. Not interesting. It might be interesting, but that's not what I would say about it. It's a very important story because it illustrates something that, it may seem simple, but it's like we have, like I said, there's something also, it's almost like I said, an attempt at crucifixion. He's being falsely accused of things, crimes that are no crimes. Like Jesus, he says he's the Messiah. It's like, okay, he's praying to his God. That's what he has to do. Yeah, and there's a point I want to make about this, about more of this. So we're going to just say, we'll pick it up at verse 18. And I'm pretty sure the next study we will complete this chapter. That's for sure. We will complete it. And then we'll move. Oh, that's mostly for sure. I don't know. The Lord, maybe he wants more studies out of it. I don't know. But until then, thanks for joining me. We'll be back again next time. And I hope next time is tomorrow.
I have a long time holding my peace. I have been still and refrain myself. Now I will cry like a woman in labor. I will destroy and devour at once. I will make waste mountains and hills and dry up all the herbs. And I will make the rivers islands, and I will dry up the pools. And I will bring the blind by way that they knew not. I will lead them in paths they have known. I will make darkness light before them, and crooked things straight. These things will I do to them, and not forsake them. They shall be turned back. They should be greatly ashamed that trust in grace.